Welcome, friends, and thank you for tuning in to the Optimal Health Program podcast today. As I promise, all sorts of good information from a variety of different excellent places or sources. We have a great guest we'll talk to in a little bit. He's going to tell us all about winemaking and the importance of real quality control of winemaking. A gentleman here from Long Island that I've known for many years. He's a terrific guy. So we'll chat with him in a bit. So first, some of the interesting articles we talk about, and I get on the computer every day to find interesting articles, and there are so many of them, it's sort of limitless. Vitamin D research, a ton of it, and there's probably more research on vitamin D than any other vitamin, and maybe any other individual drug, because there's so many important things to know about it, so many good applications for it. This is a great study. Talk about vitamin D supplements may help to improve blood pressure, cholesterol, and insulin. So when they do a big study, they call it a meta-analysis. That means that multiple facilities were doing research on that substance or that topic, and they looked at all of the conclusions from all these studies. So 99 different studies, randomized controlled trials from around the world investigating the benefits of vitamin D for cardiometabolic health. And they were talking about reaching 3,320 units of vitamin D created significant improvement in blood pressure, decreasing blood pressure, improving cholesterol, lowering cholesterol, and allowing insulin to be a little bit more efficient. So very cool study. Won't go into the entirety of it, but vitamin D is critically important for your body. It always has been, always will be. The idea is that you need to check your vitamin D levels, and for most of our patients, we'll check them as they come in for their first visit. All the vitamins, all the hormones, heavy metals, minerals, everything. It's, I think at last count, about 230 different things we look at on that initial blood test. And we make recommendations with good foods, changing the diet if need be, cutting carbs, and putting you on vitamin recommendations that are specific to correct your deficiency. Over the course of a few weeks, we recheck the abnormals on those blood tests to prove that if your vitamin D was low, now it's in the perfect range. So there has been a variety of discussions, a variety of conversations about what's the best range for vitamin D. And literature has repeatedly described, even though the blood range is between 30 to 100, the closer you are between the 80 to 100 range, the better, because that enhances your immune response, decreases risk of infections, helps to make your bones stable and strong, decreases the risk of a variety of cancers. So there are tons and tons of studies on this. So that's why we try to get a person between the 80 to 100 range. And I always mention a big study that was done in Italy, started there, went all over the world, where they were looking at vitamin D decreasing cancer risk. And throughout this long 12-plus year study, they were finding that if the D levels were between 80 and 125, that there was a 77% reduction in risk for all cancers. So amazing study. And I think it was a few hundred different facilities that were involved in that research. So pretty terrific, if you ask me. Other interesting studies on vitamin D talk about decreasing risk of infection, decreases inflammatory cascade, chronic infections. A meta-analysis showed that there was a 70% reduction in viral respiratory tract infections on people that had great vitamin D levels. Amazing. Again, it's not one study. It's not 10 studies. It's thousands. And if you go on Google Scholar and you look at vitamin D in general, there are millions of studies on vitamin D. If we also take a look at vitamin C as well, great deal of research on vitamin C. I had the privilege years ago to go to a Cancer Treatment Centers of America conference in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Of course, I bought a cowboy hat and cowboy boots when I was there because that was the cool thing to do. And, I've got to be cool when in Rome. So at this conference, there were different people lecturing. And the greatest individual that I'd met so far, the most brilliant person I had ever met, and anyone could ever meet, was Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling was a researcher that had 2 unshared Nobel Prizes because he was so brilliant. So he had 2 Nobel Prizes for his work alone, in part on, I think, biochemistry. The other was on, I forget the exact topic. But he was a genius, and he lectured us about vitamin C being critically important for humans, because a lot of animals make their own vitamin C, and in doing so, they don't have, plaque buildup in their blood vessels like humans, pigs, and primates do. At any point, he went on to give this lecture, and, you could hear a pin drop. There were hundreds of doctors in this auditorium just lingering on every word that he said. And he told an interesting story that when the blueprints for the bomb were discovered by the American military, and they sequestered him in a hotel near his facility, the Linus Pauling Institute, they wanted him to explain what this was all about, because the American researchers and doctors and such couldn't figure out how to understand, how this bomb was made. And this is certainly during the war, and all this craziness was going on. So they bring him into a room. He asked for, a couple of apples, and in a separate room, they sort of sequestered him away so he could have his peace and quiet. Within 5 minutes of him looking at this paperwork, the blueprint of the bomb, he came back out and he told the people in the government that he could explain it to them. And the researchers couldn't understand how this guy could walk in there and understand the intricacies of this crazy-looking blueprint. And because he was so brilliant, he was able to do this. And one of the people working for the government said to his superior, "Hey, what if this guy's a spy?" And the superior said, "Idiot. Why would this guy tell us how this works if he was a spy? This guy's been here forever. He's got 2 unshared Nobel Prizes. He's a genius beyond all genius." So one of my favorite stories of all time, including me, was after his lecture and everybody was scattered to get some lunch, I walked around to the back of the hotel to the cafeteria, the restaurant, and there I see Linus Pauling sitting in the corner by himself. So, of course, I didn't want to interrupt him, but of course I did, So I asked him if it was okay if I sat down with him and, give him some company at lunch. I had him to myself for 45 minutes. So I've met some really brilliant people, and I've met people who are Mensa, and I've met people who are, literal geniuses. And, when you're in the presence of a genius, you're kind of like, wow, I hope I don't say anything that sounds foolish, because I'm nowhere near as intelligent as those people. I sat with him, and it was just something completely out of another realm. And we were just discussing all sorts of things and nutrients and vitamins, and he gave me so much insight. I just felt this is the most brilliant person I've ever met. I'm sure his IQ was far greater than anybody else who's ever been recorded, because he was brilliant on everything, every topic. At any rate, I have pictures with him at home, and it was one of the greatest things in my life to be able to sit down for 45 minutes and hang out with Linus Pauling. After the 45 minutes, then all the other doctors who were coming to the restaurant started to gather around, and then it was just a big group of doctors listening to every word he said. But it was pretty amazing. It was one of the things that, made me much more interested in understanding and really being, getting in depth into testing vitamins and minerals and, fine-tuning and, creating great results for patients nutritionally. So it was an amazing, amazing event. And there's another article here that talks about research that's still ongoing at the Linus Pauling Research Institute. They have one at Oregon State University talking about vitamin C helping to inhibit free radical damage, shutting down inflammation, autoimmune mechanisms, and a relatively new idea about vitamin C binding to toxic byproducts of human fat metabolism and also preventing genetic damage. So the list of these studies and things goes on and on and on. So it's kind of spectacular. And like I say, I'm a trivia nut. So every time I get on, the computer and I go through tons and tons of paper, copy paper, I go through tons and tons of ink because I'm downloading this stuff at home and at work. And that's what I bring to show people and talk to people about. So we're going to get to phone calls in a little bit. 888-420-9272, 888-420-9272. But today I want to bring on a guest who is a genius, in my mind. He's a wonderful gentleman, and his name is Anthony Sanino. He owns a terrific vineyard out in Cutchogue, out on Long Island, and he's got a wonderful background. We'll talk all about this. We'll talk about winemaking. Every day when I see patients, people ask about wine. And, of course, because I'm Italian, we talk about food. You can't get 2 Italians together without 5 minutes going by without talking about food, or wine. So now we're going to talk about wine, how it's made, the importance of it, the beauty of the creation that can be made. And Anthony Cinino is here with us online. Anthony, are you there? I can see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, our connection is good. Yes, I hear you. Thank you for coming on the program today.
All right, awesome.
Wonderful. So over the past couple of...
thank you so much, Dr. Chris. This is obviously a pleasure and an honor.
Wonderful. Great to talk to you and see you again. Wanted to talk about the importance of a real quality control for winemaking. And virtually all of my patients drink some wine, some a lot, some a little. And I've always been talking to them about learning about what you need to buy so that you're getting something that's, the best quality. And I've been out to your vineyard many times and love the harvest and all of it. But I wanted you to be able to talk to people about, your creation of the vineyard and certainly your background, of course. So let's talk about your background and how you got started before you came into the wine business.
Yes. So I'm actually a transformed general contractor, home improvement contractor into professional winemaker. My original and formal education was in construction engineering and architecture. My focus was always more on the architecture. I was a design and build type of person. So people say, well, how do you transform into wine? And basically it's the creative side of us, right? So I'm creative. I love transforming things, and now I build, the type of wines that I want my consumers to have. Mm-hmm. So my role began as a home winemaker. Throughout the years, I would buy grapes. I followed along with home winemakers. One mentor was a friend of mine's dad, who took me into the city. We would buy grapes from California that got shipped into Brooklyn. We'd bring them home and start making wine. And obviously, Dr. Chris, you know how Italians are. And I asked Mario, how do these grapes transform into wine? He says, so what do you mean? Today we crush a grape, and next week you come back and we squeeze, and you got a wine. So obviously, being inquisitive, and I'm a little beyond, the simplicity. Although he was actually correct, it is that simple. Grapes transform into wine, and that's their destiny with our guidance. Mm-hmm. So I took out every book known to man at the time. The internet was new. It was in the early 90s, so sourcing information was not easy. I joined the American Wine Society. I went through their wine judge certification program. And at the time, I did a program with UC Davis, California, that specializes in wine education, and it was on VHS tape. So that should date me a little, right? But with that said, it evolved into my wife and I purchasing a vineyard in Cutchogue, and not necessarily having a license to make wine and sell wine. We sold a program because we loved making wine, and we wanted to bring this to everyone. And what Mario did for me, I opened our doors up as a wine school. So we had people harvesting grapes, and if you remember, you actually joined us on one of the very first harvests out.
It was wonderful.
So we brought that experience to hundreds of people. For 10 years consecutively, we ran a program, and people custom labeled their bottle at the end, but everything commercially that we do today, all of our members were doing in order to create their own homemade wine in our facility. With that evolution, we then eventually built a huge winery. One of my last hurrahs as a contractor, I built a huge energy efficient structure, and with all the perks, all the bells and whistles that a winemaker would want, because I know what I needed to produce efficiently and as clean as possible. So that's a little background history. And I shouldn't forget that our home is on the vineyard, and we run a bed and breakfast here, which really for us is our agriturismo. We saw this in Italy. We would travel to Italy, visit farms. It could be a cheese farm, it could be a winery, but we would stay with the farmer and experience their way of life for a few days once on the farm. So we brought that here as well. So now our visitors stay with us and simply walk through the vineyard and go to the tasting house where the production facility is. They'll taste through the wines. It's all part of their experience. And and I needed to bring that into the fold as we continue our discussion on wine, but that's the vibe we have here at Cennino Vineyard, is more family, Italy, and experience.
It's a great educational experience as well. You're sort of taking yourself back to some extent, hundreds of years. You think you're maybe in Tuscany and you see the vineyard and the buildings that you have there are beautiful, and it's just it's a wonderful setting. So you end up going out there, being calm, you learn, you drink some terrific wine. It's just a wonderful thing. I've always enjoyed it. The first time I came out, as you mentioned, I brought the family out, my dad, my mom, my aunts and uncles, my dad and aunts and uncles, rest their souls. We had the greatest time. We were singing with your family and your parents, and everybody was dancing, and all over the place. So it really was a wonderful harvest weekend out there.
Yeah.
So let's...
we brought that experience to many people over the years. And unfortunately, when we built... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a little difficulty hearing you. I don't know if it's... maybe the connection's a little bit off. But
did I lose you?
Yeah, so we still have you. It's just wanted to get some ideas as to when you first got to the vineyard. I know you did all the work yourself. You did everything by hand, and I remember being out there with our good friend Mike and doing all of this. It was just a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And taking all the courses and learning everything you could learn. Tell us some of the different things that are really specific to the way the wine turns out. I'm sure weather and water and the terroir, the soil, these are things that people don't really understand.
Yeah, what's unique and good to understand is that every prominent wine region has its own microclimate, also lending it to certain grape varieties. Fortunately for us on Long Island, we can grow many of the varieties that are known worldwide. So internationally, typical grape varieties like Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay on the white side, these are grapes that are recognized throughout the world. We have the ability of growing them and ripening them to the point where we can make extremely high quality wine. Also keeping in mind, when a region grows a certain grape, it grows what it can grow, but it doesn't grow all varieties. Bringing back Italy, northern Italy grows certain varieties that are completely different than southern Italy. If you remember the movie Sideways, where Paul Giamatti loved his Pinot Noir, but he really disliked Merlot. And Hollywood destroyed Merlot throughout the world. But in actuality, they're like apples and oranges. They're two completely different grapes. If you're in France, you're not going to have Merlot in the Burgundy region. That would be the Pinot Noir. You're not even allowed legally to grow it there. So they missed the point on educating people. And unfortunately, us in the industry take the rap because now people have a generalization of a grape rather than the quality of the grape based on its region.
I remember being out there and sitting with you and looking at all the varieties of things or the variables that can control how that wine ends up. You had a book that was like 3 inches thick of all the different types of yeast. Depending upon what you wanted to do with that wine, you would choose a certain type of yeast and how long you'd ferment it and the different oak barrels. And it's just so many variables. So for people to think that, Merlot is always a certain thing, that's not always, so. There's so many different things that can change the great outcome of the wine.
Yeah, they're bringing back Mario when he said, hey, today we do this and next week we have wine, is essentially true. And the phenolics of the varieties are different. The steps are really, really simple. It's sugar converting into alcohol, and the catalyst, as you mentioned, is yeast. Yeast already exists on the grape skin. The tool of purchasing yeast, as you were mentioning in a book, is simply that. These are cultivated yeasts from throughout the world, so these are not additives. They're truly going to be on the grape skin itself anyway, but we have the ability now of kind of morphing how the end result would be slightly. The grape Merlot would still represent Merlot, but perhaps this yeast is a little stronger. It can ferment higher quantities of sugar without stalling. So science has given us this ability to perfect our art. We can control temperature on a tank. So if I ferment at a cooler temperature than a warmer temperature, I can end up with a different result in my finished wine. So all of these tools help us from one winemaker to another, still same grape variety. And I guess I jumped the gun a bit because now we're talking about wine making, but even growing the grape, how we tend to our vineyard, if we fertilize organically, inorganically, if we provide irrigation versus no irrigation and did a dry grow season compared to a wet one, all of these factors are already contributing to the final wine prior to even making the wine.
Of course.
So,
and good soil is a key issue and key concept. And you test the soil frequently to see that it's got everything that the vine needs.
Absolutely. So the vines are like any other plant, are going to pull nutrients from the soil. As you were mentioning earlier, as us, we need our vitamins and we need certain things, and sometimes we produce it, sometimes we don't. We do have to make those amendments in the soil. And frequently monitor as well. So Long Island, as we were mentioning, being a prominent wine region, does have all these varieties. We have the tools as the winemakers to create differences from one winemaker to another. And inputs in the vineyard are also important, like we were mentioning, organic versus inorganic. So all of this will lend itself to a different outcome.
And then the amount of time that the wine stays at temperature in different containers, and I remember, making some of the wine and using the different oaks, Hungarian or French or Italian or otherwise, brand new oak barrel where it would give an oaky flavor, and then you'd have to switch it to a neutral barrel after it was toasted. It's a spectacular thing.
Yeah,
to watch.
I'm impressed that you remember much of this terminology.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know it's amazing. Finishing wines in barrel versus a steel fermented wine could be completely different, and there are different purposes. Once we go into barrel, we're looking for a different, obviously different outcome in flavors, but yet the most important part of barrels is longevity in bottle. So only wines produced in barrel will have longevity in the bottle. Mm-hmm. When you're purchasing a white wine and somebody tells you, well, consume this within the first couple of years because the wine will decline, doesn't make it less of a wine. It just makes it a wine designed to be consumed within the first couple of years, where age-worthy wines will be aged first in barrel for a certain number of years and then go into bottle. But then to your point, the types of barrels are endless. Three regions that we buy oak from, the U.S. or North America primarily, could be in Canada and North America. French, which are the most desired, most expensive. And then we have Eastern Europe, Slovenia or Hungary, most popular in Eastern Europe. So how the oak tree grows in these regions is like how the grapevine, if it's Merlot growing in Bordeaux versus California versus Long Island, are different, and their general flavor profiles would be different because the plant is growing in a different region. Then when we ask our cooper to assemble the barrel, we can now select in France in particular, we can select the forest that the tree was grown in. Wow. When they put the barrel together, we can select how long the wood was aged before they made the barrel. So they dry the oak, could be 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year. They go by months, 12 month, 24 month, or 36 month air dried wood. Then they toast the barrel on the interior. So depending on your style of winemaking, you may want no toast, light toast, medium toast, or heavy toast. Wow. And surely, if you drink enough wine, you'll be toasted. To add that to the
yeah, no, it's
so
amazing.
Yeah, we have a lot of tools. Yeah, lots of tools in order to create differences in our wine.
What are some of your favorite things that, or wines that you make, or some of the favorite combinations that I know we had a lot of fun trying to take a little bit of this or that, Sangiovese and Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, to be able to change the outcome of a wine to make it taste like something, that would be amazing. What are some of your favorites?
So there is one particular variety that we grow and it excels in our region. It's Petit Verdot. Petit Verdot happens to be the sister grape to Malbec. So in Bordeaux, France, these two varieties are used to enhance our Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, or Cabernet Franc because of depth of color, mouthfeel, earthiness. So I like working with that as a base to enhance certain things or make a single variety with it. One of my favorite home blends is the Francesco, named after my dad, where I will actually select my favorite barrels of 4 different grape varieties, the Cab Sauv, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot. So before I make any of the single varieties, I'm actually selecting my favorites. And favorite not meaning newest barrel. Sometimes it could be a neutral barrel, as you mentioned, where lots of the flavor was pulled out. But a neutral barrel will allow the grape variety to be first and foremost, or prominent in its flavor profiles. So those selections take place first, and I'll create the Francesco wine. So it's definitely an artistic form. Going back to my roots of designing and building wine is actually it's a little more fun than working in somebody's home, quite honestly.
Absolutely, and the outcome is terrific as well. And so many times coming out there, having a nice little charcuterie board and sampling the wine, it's a wonderful experience. Yeah,
absolutely. I know you were also asking about additives in wines and how they're created. And again, circling back to Mario and the simplicity of creating wine from grapes, there's actually nothing that has to be added. If I didn't use a cultured yeast for fermentation and I allowed the grape itself to utilize the yeast that's on the skin or the bloom that contains the yeast, we can ferment as long as we monitor the process, correct temperatures, making sure our vessels are not open to the air, because air creates spoilage organisms. So we're controlling the process. We can simply make wine by allowing the grape itself to ferment, turn into wine, press the juices out, which at that point of wine, whether we age it or go into steel, filter, fine, and then bottle. It is the most natural thing we can create and then consume when it's finished. And yes, there are additives. I'm sure, if somebody had a low sugar wine, maybe they add some sugar to increase alcohol. Other than sulfur dioxide, which is another conversation we can have if you like. But sulfur dioxide is designed to extinguish oxygen so that when wine is in a sealed vessel, as long as we don't have oxygen, we can't have spoilage. And the best analogy, if you take an apple, cut it in half, the browning that you see within minutes is oxidation. And oxidation is the beginning of spoilage.
Right.
So sulfur dioxide helps to extinguish that possibility. So the best thing you can do with wine is decant it to volatilize the sulfur dioxide so that it opens and your flavor and your aromatic molecules are much more prominent at that point.
Are there certain types of wine that you should decant, and are there some that you shouldn't or wouldn't decant?
When it comes to white wines, most people don't decant them, although I believe it's a good practice to do it anyway. White wines are more sensitive than red wines in terms of oxidation. So they tend to have a little more sulfur dioxide than red wines. So in the process of decanting, you're splashing again and volatilizing that sulfur. You will have a better experience with the wine. The aromatics are much more prominent. The flavors are there. The molecules opened up and allowed them to explode in your mouth. But more importantly, with reds, if they're a simply made red wine, not too much commercial processing where we didn't filter or refine, it does help to decant, because now you're also separating sediment that you may find that naturally occur. Color in wine turns to a solid, drops to the bottom of the bottle. Crystals from acids will solidify and drop to the bottom of the bottle. And this happens in naturally produced wines where there's not too much interaction from the winemaker, not too much of filtration and fining and some of the other steps that you may find in a commercial wine or a commercial brand that may want extreme consistency for their consumer year after year. So decanting does help in that respect.
On a side note, I remember when you first started and we were out there and picking grapes off and Frankie, we have to do this year, and bring everybody, the family out, the families, cutting the grape clusters off of the vine and then putting them into the basket. And then after the baskets are full, driving that little cart back to the garage, which the way you had set it up before, there was a little, probably 5 or 6 foot machine that was a destemmer that would crush the grapes. The stems would go out the side of the machine, and then all the grape skins and liquid would go into the large container. And watching that whole process was so much fun. It was a great deal of fun. And then watching to see what would happen, and you keep crushing the grape skins to get more of that, delicious wine essence out of the skins was just, it's a great, now, of course, you've got a gigantic machine that's the size of, I don't know, one of those tractors you see on these big excavation, scenes. So you can handle a great deal more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the machines changed; they got larger, but the simple process still exists. It's not any different in terms of how it's happening. It's just the equipment is a lot larger, and actually, as I get older, I need more efficiency. I'd rather do less of the physical work and allow the machines to do more of it.
Sure. No, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot to, and I'm sure you have a day's worth of, okay, this is what we have to do first, second, third. You have a process that you have to follow to create, your best outcome and to be as efficient as you can. But it's work. It's not simple. It's hard work. You're not shoveling with shovels. You're using, machines and everything, but you got to really be on top of it.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging when it comes to weather because we're at Mother Nature's mercy. But then Mother Nature helps us because not every grape variety is ripe at the same time. So we do select what's ripe first in order to harvest and start production. But within a 2-month period, all of the grapes are harvested in our region. Anywhere from September to November, we're harvesting and creating our wines. This time of year, we're gearing up for bottling. So a lot of the white wines and rosés that are simple stainless steel fermentations are getting ready for bottling. Simultaneously, the older vintage in barrel is now becoming mature enough to be bottled. So those blends are created, and those are 2 years behind the current vintage of whites. So we do a 2-year aging process in barrel before we go to bottle on red. So it's an extensive process, but the protocol, year after year is similar. But as an artist, we like to tweak a little bit. We do have a good following in our wine club, and our wine club members are looking for our sort of consistency, but yet what's Tony doing this year? What is he creating that's different than last year? If I get my hands on a new grape variety, it becomes a new product for our consumer.
What sort of things are you doing in preparation for the spring to be able to make sure the soil has everything it needs? You're putting minerals and such into the soil, I'm sure.
Yeah, so right now we're pruning. So the vines, all the extra growth from this past growing season is being cut down. We leave just enough canes to produce the fruit for next year. Soil amendments go in the spring. Soil testing took place in the fall, right after harvest, so we know where we left off. but amendments are added just as the plant is starting to wake up. We'll start doing amendments. If we miss something, we can test mid-season and then do what we call a foliar application. So in a liquid form, the leaves will absorb what it might be missing and whatever addition we're doing, so that the plant can sustain and still bring its fruit to ripeness. Because it is about the mommy plant making sure that the clusters are happy and come to the end of ripeness.
So with I've heard of the concept of, the leaves. Obviously, you don't want to have too many leaves, minimizing some of the sun that can get to the grapes. Is that true? You're pruning to get rid of some of the.
So in our region, we remove leaves to promote airflow and minimize any kind of mildew that might develop because of morning dew or afternoon dew. But in our region, we do remove the leaves. We take advantage of the airflow. In some regions, they want excessive leaf cover because they don't want their grapes to burn. It might be too hot. Leaves and the size of the canopy, you'll see us hedging the vineyard at one point in the summer. Excessive growth throws the plant out of balance. So the height of our vineyard trellis is a predetermined height. It's scientifically designed so that we have 14 to 18 leaves per shoot. Every one of those shoots can have anywhere between 1 and 3 clusters. The beauty is that we can mitigate any issues we have with Mother Nature. If we don't have enough sunshine, we may want to remove 2 clusters or 1 cluster and kind of balance out the growing season with the crop load. Everything is so that we can bring in the highest quality fruit in order to produce the highest quality wine.
And I know
there's a tremendous amount of work in the growing season.
Over the years, you've expanded the amount of property and vineyards there. You've got a wonderful tasting room that I've been to many times. I remember you acquiring different properties with different grapes, like the Petit Verdot is another section that you've added on. How much or how many different wines do you have out of all the different properties?
So we're growing currently about 8 different varieties. We just purchased last year another 13 acres. I added Malbec to the planting. We added Gruner Veltliner, another German beautiful white grape variety. Sauvignon Blanc, which we would make wine from Sauvignon Blanc that we purchased, but now we'll have our own coming into fruit within a couple of years. I added more Petit Verdot, my favorite. So that's on the new planting. And then we have another 8 acres there we can plant additional vines.
That's amazing.
Coming up in the next couple of years.
I'll have to come out soon and take a tour and see all the different new properties and the new grapes. It really is a wonderful thing for people that are into wine. And even if you're not, it's a great way to just go out and see how things are done. I'm always fascinated by how things are done. And there's a TV show called How Things Are Made or How It's Made. I love watching that show because it shows you how something is created from either nothing to, a full-blown machine, or, you're learning how to make wine, or, how musical instruments are made. It's fascinating to see how something's created from something minimal to something, terrific. But, I can't wait to get out there. Let's talk about your tasting room and your location, because I'd love for people to learn about it and get out there.
Yeah, we're actually in the heart of Cutchogue, right on Route 48. The very first winery, which was Hargrave, now called Castello di Borghese, is only a stone's throw from our location. So we're literally center of the entire wine region. Like I was mentioning earlier, the facility was designed, to help me as a winemaker and be as extremely efficient as possible for visitors that come out. We do some small food offerings with a little bit of an Italian flair. So the charcuterie and the cheese boards and meat and cheese boards are in the Italian vibe. We have small pizzettas that we warm up. The wines, we always have at least 12 or 13 wines on the menu, depending on time of year. Wintertime, we have our holiday spice wine. It's a mulled wine already finished in bottle. a red or a barrel-aged red that's infused with cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, allspice, and I added star anise in the last run. So that's a unique winter favorite. But then come spring and summer, it's not a common sale. My port, which I believe you know very well,
absolutely,
is one of our biggest sellers.
One of my favorites.
And that's aged. Yeah, we do. As you know, we do a fortification during fermentation. We arrest fermentation by adding a wine spirit. And the upside now with the wine spirit is that I'm now a licensed farm distillery. So we can turn our wine into our neutral spirit for the port right on premise, where in the past I would have to buy that. And then finishing the port, we'd finish it with a brandy. But currently I'm able to age my own neutral spirit in barrel to create our own brandy.
Oh, so wonderful.
Those flavors now are 100% in-house.
Wow.
So that's a unique product and a good favorite here at the winery.
So your location, getting through Riverhead in that crazy traffic circle that drives everybody crazy. You're only a few minutes out of where that traffic circle is in Riverhead. What's the street that you're on? It's 48, but there's a name for that street. Is it Ocean or Beach?
Early on, that's Sound. I think it's Sound Avenue. Yeah. So Sound Avenue turns into County Route 48 when it becomes a 2-lane highway. Prior to that, it's Sound Avenue. So if you took Edwards Avenue completely north up to Sound Avenue, we're like 12 or 15 minutes east of there.
Okay. Wonderful.
And the traffic is during pumpkin season for sure.
Yeah, I remember going to get pumpkins, then going to do some wonderful wine tasting. What's your phone number at the facility? Okay, great. Yeah, so we're 631-734-8282. You can hit any extension from there. It could be the tasting house. It could be the innkeeper for the bed and breakfast. And general sales, I believe there's another number there that you can hit a link to. Wonderful. I know we have to book the bed and breakfast early because it's been packed. You can't just say, "Oh, I'd like to go out there, tomorrow." Yeah. The bed and breakfast is packed, and rightly so, because it's a wonderful experience. And the times that I've stayed up in that room, you really think you're in Tuscany. All you see is vineyard all around, and it's just a gorgeous experience. And you and your family, it's a wonderfully lovely, lovely people, lovely time. We'll be out there soon. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Great. Thank you so much for coming on the program today. Me on. Absolutely. I told Frankie and Sabrina we're going to come out with the cameras. We're going to do a whole session out there where we do another program.
And we're looking forward to it.
Yeah. Can't wait.
All right, great.
Wonderful. Have a wonderful day, buddy. Thank you so much. Anthony Cennino from Cennino's Vineyard in Cutchogue. A wonderful experience. Excuse me.
Love that guy. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me?
It's a terrific experience. A great deal of fun. You go out and you're with a large, large group of very knowledgeable people, and so you're able to learn a great deal and have a wonderful time, and eat and drink. So it's a terrific time. Let's get the phone lines open.
Yeah, we got some questions already.
Okay, 888-420-9272. Excuse me, 888-420-9272. Let's get to our callers and our Instagrammers and our TikTokers and everybody who wants some info.
So, we're going to get you a cough button. Don't you worry, Doc.
I guess I need one of those.
So we have, what do we have first? We have a question actually regarding the wine that we just talked about. What are the health benefits of drinking wine?
The benefits of wine are pretty significant, and for thousands of years that wine has been on the table, we know that the proanthocyanidins, all the great antioxidants in wine, are important for your body. They're good for your cardiovascular system. They're good for blocking free radicals from creating damage. So it's an important mechanism to bring some good things, onto the table as you're having your meal. And I'm not saying people should have bottles and bottles and bottles, but a couple of glasses of wine I think is a great idea. Right, Louis? What do you think? It's a great idea. He's such a cutie.
He's the best.
Yeah, there are lots of studies about the benefits of wine too, and get into some of the technical, nomenclature about it. But I think for most of my patients, I tell them you could drink a glass of wine a day, but get the best wine you can, because there are some wines that are inexpensive that I think are not great and not made terribly well. And I'm not saying you have to go out and buy crazy, super expensive wine, from Europe, but I usually make some recommendations for people. And, Total Wine over I guess it's Westbury, has a gigantic selection of everything. And there's a gentleman, I forget his name, who works in this section where it's all the Italian and the French wines. And there's a terrific wine from Sicily called Nero d'Avola. It's an excellent grape. It's a nice full-bodied red wine, and it's not expensive at all. It's somewhere between $12 to $15 to $20 for a bottle. So I think it's a great wine for that price. Going beyond that, you have a variety of different. There's some great French wines. Chateauneuf du Pape is great. That could be in the $20 to $30 cost. And then going upwards of that, Tassanaya, Tignanello is a favorite wine of mine. But then, you're going, above and beyond. So for a lot of people, they'll buy as their daily drinking wine something in the $10 to $20 bottle. And, of course, a well-versed individual at Total Wine may be able to give you ideas as to what you can try within that, range for Italian and French and even some of the South American wines. And now and then people will go out and buy, $100 or $150 bottle of wine and enjoy the difference in that. So you can do this in whichever way you like. Okay, let's get to our next question.
So we're shifting a bit. We have a question. Can you order an amino acid blend from Baxter Lab? It contains all 22 aminos, essential and non.
There are a lot of amino acid products that are out there and a variety of different places that you can get them from. So there's not one place that's better than another, because amino acids are relatively simple to take in powder or put into a capsule. I think quality control is relatively straightforward with amino acids. So everybody has a different idea as to what they want to do. There's some people who just want to take aminos. I think it may be better to get a protein powder that has all the great amino acids in it. You may get some other vitamins along with that. The one that I use is called Orgain, and it's an organic protein powder, 21 grams of protein and some nutrients in it. So it just makes a great deal of sense. It's gluten-free, it's organic, so it's probably one of the best ones on the market. I get that at Whole Foods. And I'm sure there are another dozen that are really good, but, people have to do a little bit of research, see what they like, look at labels, make sure the labels say that there's more no's than anything else, no corn, no gluten, no chemicals, no metals, no et cetera. So you want to get as organic and as healthy as possible, a protein powder for that.
We actually have some questions that Anthony could have answered previously, but people are asking, are you thinking about making distilled spirits like brandy and cognac? He mentioned
you can do that. He can. So the beautiful thing about the wine club, and I first was attracted to this by a very close friend, Mike, who's known Anthony since, grade school. And we went out there to see the whole winemaking process, and it was amazing. So I joined the wine club, and we did that. We took Sangiovese, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc to make our own version of an Italian wine called Tignanello, which, as I mentioned, is a very expensive wine. I think, you can purchase that in Total Wine now, but the cost is high. It's $190 at a discount wine, facility. In the restaurants, it's, crazy, but we tried to copy that because we thought it would be fun, and we did. It came out really good. So it came out to be a nice homemade combination with those things. But because he has the ability to do that now, he could make grappa, you could flavor it, you could make fig tasting grappa, you could take you could make any of these things. So I think that's, for a lot of people, it's a great deal of fun to be able to do that.
I cannot wait for that episode live from the vineyard.
It's a great deal of fun. It's a gorgeous place. They're wonderful people. You sit out there, you relax, sit out on these outdoor chairs. The weather's beautiful. Spring, summer, and fall, it's wonderful to be there. And I've done it, in each of the seasons. But some of the bigger fun is being there at harvest time because you're cutting the grapes. You put them in the basket. You do that whole process, watch everything crushed. You go through the whole lecture of, how it's done. And it's just a great deal of fun. And then, over the course of a year, 2 years, you have your own homemade wine with your label on it. The first one that I made, I called Sangre di Terra, Blood of the Earth. So I think I still have some of that. Of course, I had to lock the door on my wine cellar because family members were sneaking in there and grabbing everything they could.
The lock is the number one thing you need on that. That's for sure.
888-420-9272 if you'd like to call in to ask a question. 888-420-9272. If you'd like to call in, you could do so now or send us a message. I'm of the mind that more and more so today, people need to either make or create their own food, consumables. You can grow your own food. And whereas generations of people have done this in their yard forever, you can obviously test the soil and make sure it's got all the good things in it. You could compost, which is an old school Italian thing, not really limited to only Italians, but put all sorts of great stuff that you've had from your meals into the soil to make it rich and strong.
You mentioned those gardens you could have indoors.
Yeah.
And me and my wife, we got one.
Wow.
We were so excited. And one thing I will let the listeners know, when you're picking your seeds, okay, you need one that's big enough for the seed that you're putting in. We put some pepper plants in, and it got too big too quick.
Oh my God!
It overflew like the whole thing. We had to move it and plant it outside.
Yeah.
So think about that.
You got to figure out your space and dimensions there.
Right.
Because that device is about 5-6 feet high, right, and maybe 4 feet wide.
Yeah.
But I'm going to order it this week. I love the idea because then year-round you have this perfectly grown organic vegetables.
Yeah.
In the garden that I have outside, so up against my house, I have, as I've mentioned, 4 fig trees that have flourished because they're up against the warmth of the house, and I have tomatoes and eggplant. I love eggplant. So the Sicilian eggplant, which is white, and the pale lavender eggplant as well. I have a variety of different types and tomatoes and a lot of arugula because that grows like crazy. Interesting, arugula comes back year after year because I didn't plant it again this year because we had so much that lived through the winter and lived through the snow. It's invincible. And the more things you put there, beans and peas. And when I first moved to my house many years ago, I set up a blackberry bush. I put one blackberry bush on a hill. This thing grew all the way down the hill. It kept shooting along. So and I get tons. I get more blackberries than you could ever imagine. But it's nice to go pick your own stuff. But it's a great way to, enjoy your own well-controlled food. In a similar circumstance, if you like wine, you can have wine made in a perfect environment. Why not? And it's cost-effective, too, because I think the cost of doing the wine club, and I don't know about all the other places, if the oak barrels, whether you start with a new barrel to get a little oak flavor in the wine, then switch to a neutral barrel that's been toasted and it's there for a year, a couple of years, you end up getting 300 bottles of wine from that large oak barrel. And when I looked at this, I think it ends up coming out to be like $10 or $12, might be a little bit more per bottle. So you're getting an amazing wine that you made, you controlled, perfect environment for less than what you would ever spend at the store for wines that you don't know the exact nature of. And I have a good friend, Tom, who is a wine connoisseur, and he's got a spectacular wine cellar in his basement. He knows a great deal about wine, owns a great wine bar called the Audrey in Oyster Bay. And I've gone on wine tastings with him. He had one at his restaurant in Farmingdale, Casa Stellina, and we were drinking wine grown on a mountain in California. And I didn't understand, the advantages of wine grown on elevation in the mountain. I think when you have a little bit of oxygen decrease, the plant becomes stronger to really extract more oxygen. You're grabbing great nutrients from the soil, et cetera, et cetera. So as I learned, some of the wine that's made on the mountain was absolutely spectacular. And the wines that they brought in, and the gentleman from the vineyard came, it's a very, I'm not sure boutique is the right way to describe it, but it's a very specific controlled mechanism. They're 100-point wines. With Wine Spectator and some of the judges, these are 100-point wines. And I really haven't had much of the 100-point wine types before, but they were spectacular. Of course, they're very expensive, but every now and then you spend a couple of bucks and you'll have that experience. You do it for a special occasion, etc. It's great. Once again, 888-420-9272 if you'd like to call in to ask a question. Let's take some of the emails we have from the website, and we have so many of them. We're using 3 or 4 staff now to try to answer the emails back. And it's funny because some people, rather than asking a question or two, will send us a whole page, like hundreds of words of information. And it's almost, an overload of information. And, there's 30 questions in there. So, we'll tell them, got your email. We have a lot of good information for you. But either you should do a telehealth visit with the doctor where I can sit there, talk with them, and go through everything, or come in to the office and, of course, get blood testing done. So it's just easier if people have a couple of questions, then we can just answer them relatively quickly. So Josephine in Lindenhurst, the vampire facial, what's that all about? So there's a term given to a procedure to try to improve your skin on your face, and they call it a vampire facial because you're taking blood from your body, spinning it. You end up getting 7 growth factors. It's PRP, platelet-rich plasma, and you're injecting that throughout the skin in small increments, and that's meant to put these growth factors and healing factors into your skin to create a result. But the PRP, it's not lasting more than a month. We do PRP for joints and muscle tears and such, but it'll be there and work, do its job for a month. Some people that want benefit from that technique might need to do it a few times. The other option that we do is stem cell therapy, your own stem cells, and as you inject them in similar fashion all over your face, you're putting billions of cells to work to repair and to grow, sort of like, in my analogies, like sharks have teeth that keep coming up over and over and over again. Your skin cells keep coming up, and as they come up newer because of the stem cells, you get this great, facial rejuvenation. So that's, I think, a far better mechanism of repair than just doing the PRP, because the PRP, if you do it 5 or 6 times, that becomes, the expense of one stem cell therapy. So let's see, another question from John. Has joint pain, and he thinks it correlates with foods, which is pretty interesting because there are a lot of people that now are looking at their foods and trying to correlate that with symptoms, which is smart. So yeah, there are probably 30% of people that I see that have problems with foods, either allergic reactions or sensitivity to foods that cause aches and pains in their joints. When they take those foods out, the aches and pains go away. Historically, there have been foods thought to cause aches and pains that are nightshades: potato, tomato, eggplant, peppers. And for some people, yes, but that's a small segment of the population of people that I see. Although allergy to food can cause symptoms anywhere in your body because it's propagated through your blood. So yes, there are symptoms that can come from food allergy, but those symptoms kind of wax and wane. It would be different than a tear you might have in your shoulder or your knee or your hip that's going to be persistent and is going to be there, all the time or long time. So yes, if we were to test you for allergy and we find the foods are a problem, take them out. If your joint pain improves, great. If not, then we recommend doing the MRI because you want to see exactly what those ligaments, tendons, cartilage, labrum, disc, all of those things, meniscus, all those things, what they look like to determine the extent of wear and tear and damage. Once again, 888-420-9272. If you'd like to call in and ask a question, you could do so. Another question from Adele. How do I tell what's causing my fatigue? So fatigue is a very big problem. And I think 70% of patients, maybe more, that I see, and I have seen over the years, been a physician for 39 years now, are presentation with some fatigue, some exhaustion, some, tired and achy here and there, but it's a conversation that I have every day. So fatigue can come from many things, maybe 40 or 50 different possibilities. Low thyroid, low DHEA, low testosterone, low estrogen, progesterone. Low blood sugar is extremely common because people, in many cases, eat too much carbohydrate, spikes your sugar, insulin drops your sugar all the way down, and you're tired, achy, irritable, anxious, and sometimes panicky. Anemia can do that, iron deficiency. So the list goes on and on. Heavy metal exposure. So when we look at our big blood test that I say has an average of about 230 different things in it, we'll find all the underlying causes of fatigue. And as we correct those things, your fatigue resolves and gets better. Another very common cause are virus or infection. Epstein-Barr and CMV are very common causes of fatigue because they spread like wildfire. So important to look at all of these factors. Anything else there, Frankie?
It's like that'll do it.
All righty. So wonderful session today. Thank you all for listening. Give us a call at the office, 516-794-0404. And if you see on News 12 or any of the other TV venues that we have our new podcast commercial on, you'll see our little QR code. So you can hit upon that to gather information. Website's drcalapai.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for all of your emails to the website. We had 700 some odd people hit the website over the course of a couple of hours. Last week we were looking at that. So that's phenomenal to me. But, I love this, and we're here for you. So give us a call, give us a text, contact us. We'd love to help.